Well, greetings, leader, and welcome to another episode of NGM Focus. And I am so excited to be bringing this to you today. For so many of you, you've been in your church a long time and you've really developed a deeper relationship with your senior class. And this could be a very bittersweet time. I know for me, it was a very tearful time when you see them graduating because, well, you're excited for them to be launching into the new phase, the new season of their lives. You become very, very close. You've invested so much into them. You've done missions trips, camps, retreats, one-on-one times. You've seen them go through highs and lows, and it's tough. But here's the question. How do we make sure that our seniors, when they graduate from high school, they don't graduate from church and they don't graduate from God? Is there anything we can do? Well, that's next on NGM Focus. Well, again, welcome, and here we are into episode 4 and also our session 4 in this particular series on ministry transitions. I hope the first 3 have made a really significant difference in different ways that you approach ministry, from the 5th graders going to 6th grade, helping the parents of those rising 6th graders, last week looking into helping the middle schoolers connect well into high school ministry, and now here we are on the exit strategy, the exit plan. I just mentioned in the opener, so many students seem to graduate from high school, and unfortunately, so many seem to graduate from God and church, and we don't want that to happen now, do we? Of course not. We're shepherds to the core. We want to make sure that our students continue to focus well with Christ. So under the crucial components, there are not that many this week. It's just very simple. Just like the other transitions, this one, got my notes here, you got your notes, let's fire, right? So just like the other transitions, this one must go smooth. Why? Very simple, 2 major bullet points. Simply put, while there is a lot of variety in statistics out there, and some seem to argue over the statistics of how many students are dropping out of church, the reality is, I've heard 65, I've heard 85%. The reality is we're losing a lot. And this should break our hearts. So let's close that gap and make sure we don't lose any of them, right? So simply put, we want to make sure that our students, as their upperclassmen, are even more investing into our ministries, into God's ministry, and into our local churches. Second bullet point is, so we must still see them engaged with us if we expect them to engage into their local church. So if we really want to see them launch out of our student ministries into the overall body of the church or into their other contexts of life, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, whether it's a college setting, military, or they're just moving away from home, leaving small town USA and venturing out, back in the day type way of looking at things. Whatever it is, when they leave our high school ministries, we really want to make sure they're connecting with either our local church or a local church. So for practical suggestions, I'm jumping right into it. I simply have 4 headers of practical suggestions. And these bullet points, to be honest with you, are not maybe, the best ones out there, but they're tried and true. I've used them for years myself. I would not throw anything on the table that I've not actually done in ministry, because I want to make sure that it's like I said, tried and true. Not perfect, but we've done them. So just some thoughts here. The first area is the word retention. So there's a blank there to fill that in, retention. We want to make sure that we are retaining our high school seniors. Because again, if we're not retaining them, they're not going to be stepping into the church ministry after graduation. So we have to do everything we can to be on point and to retain them. I have a few thoughts on this. First bullet point is, consider you and your spouse. In the traditional sense, myself as youth pastor, my wife was involved in the ministry. And a lot of times youth ministers' spouses are not involved in ministry, but if yours is, consider taking on the senior class. Janet, my wife, and I did this for multiple years. We would take the senior class as our small group, our D group, discipleship group, our A accountability group, whatever terms you use. We've used shepherd groups and flock groups and all kinds of the crazy terms, right? End of the day, you know what I'm talking about. Most of us do kind of structure our small groups with same grade, same gender. So for me, I really enjoy taking on the dudes of the senior class. So when did we get that? Just like last week I mentioned about the transition took place at the beginning of the summer. So a summer camp, here they are. I am now focusing on the senior guys, and my wife was focusing on the senior girls. That's just one thing. Now, the next 3 bullet points are more, I would even say, very simple theological framework here. And when I moved here to Lynchburg, Virginia back in 2003, when I was teaching in a university setting, it was a couple years later, my wife and I were asking ourselves a question. Why is it that we actually had our senior class not only retain, but gain? We actually saw a gain of our juniors and seniors. as far as numbers wise, attendance, more students were coming in the senior year. We weren't losing, we're actually gaining. Praise God. And I actually asked my wife that question, and we started bantering back and forth, and I came up with these three. So I've had these three in the brain like since 2004, 2005. It goes like this. I thought, Jan, I said, I taught biblical truth. I taught them as young adults. And I'm a big fan of teaching your students theology and apologetics. And that was back in the 1980s and 90s, early 2000s. Now here we are, even more so in a desperate need in the church to teach not just our teenagers, but our adults, excellent theology and apologetics. Know what to believe and know why you believe it. So I'm a big fan of this. And I look back and I realize, because your seniors, if you're still kind of given, let me say, third grade lessons, of course they're not going to want to be around. They've been there, done that. They've heard that since, kids ministry and VeggieTales, right? So we want to make sure that they're really coming and they're growing. And this is a sidebar, not in my notes. But youth leader, I saw it as a badge of honor when I would have adults who weren't in the ministry, as far as the student ministry, come to me for biblical questions. And this is what they would say. This is not anti-senior pastor. I'm a fan. Okay. My dad was a senior pastor forever. I'm a fan of senior pastors. I'm not ripping. I'm saying many times, because you typically as a youth worker are typically seen as more relational, more approachable possibly. I would have people come into me over the years, and not just one church, but different churches where I served. And they say, Rich, can I ask you a Bible question? And I felt so honored that they felt they could come to me, but also that I would give them a biblical answer to their question. In other words, my goal, even then going from church into the classroom and being a professor, was to teach our men and women to be so in tune, so aware, so deep in the Word of God that adults in your church would see you as a person of the Word, and you represent the Word well, and your ministries represent the Word well. Does this make sense? I hope it does. Your teaching ministry must be deep. Second area, I say third bullet point, but the second of my kind of trilogy there, is treat them like young adults. You'd be hard to go back in my ministry and hear me saying the word kids. I do not call students kids. I know a lot of people do. I don't. I see them as young adults. At 16, 17, I mean, my children all had adult jobs at 16 and 17. Jenna was working in a hair salon. She was on the till. In other words, she was the one that was taking the payments and had to be responsible for what came in and what goes out on that cash register. Both my sons worked at Chick-fil-A, right? So my pleasure. Okay, there you go. But both my boys worked at Chick-fil-A. They had adult responsibilities at 16, 17. We give our teenagers in this country at 16, 17 an adult responsibility of driving a vehicle, which can be a great opportunity for good things, or actually could be almost like a weapon of death. And I don't mean like they're going to attack somebody, but it could be used to actually harm someone inadvertently. So in other words, our culture sees them as adults, sees them as young adults, and they come to our churches and we call them kids. Now that's a bandwagon I jump on a lot, but I really believe that because I respected them as young adults. I didn't treat them as children. I didn't treat them as kids. And that final bullet point there was this: provide them with significant responsibility. Provide them with significant responsibility. And I really believe this. Give your seniors, as they're rising seniors going into their senior year, that summer before their senior years, when we rolled them up, and they became the leaders of our missions trip. They became the leaders at different things in summer camp. They still had adult supervision over them. We didn't abdicate our leadership as adults, but we truly did the older to younger generation means of discipling through giving them significant responsibilities. And I don't know what you think about those three kind of bullet points I just shared, plus the first one on getting you guys involved as far as a small group. But those next bullet points, bullet point 2, 3, and 4, I'm a fan. As I look back, I realized I think we're onto something there. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Retention. Second is connection. So now how do we connect them really well to our local church? Just don't wait until they graduate. Connect them even now as juniors and seniors with your local church. So here's some thoughts. When I say consider, we actually did that. A couple of churches I served on the West Coast. Both churches I served in our lead pastor and other senior leadership would come to summer camp, be part of our summer camps. So our students were getting involved, seeing our various pastors like doing skits, being a counselor of the upperclassmen dudes. Okay, so I mean, it was really, really sweet to watch our students see their lead pastors, playing games, hanging out, just doing life in student ministry. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. That's one of those things to look back and go, that was good. Okay. Second bullet point, encourage your men's director, encourage your women's director to in some way serve in your student ministry. I was blessed in my last church on the West Coast years ago to have both the men's director, Mike, and our women's director, Shelly, actually be engaged in our student ministry. Wow. And they just did it because they love students. Yeah, and their children were actually in the student ministry, but they actually loved teenagers. And I was thinking, what a double win, because now our adolescents are also seeing adult leadership involved in a weekly, or let's say at least each month, in a ministry role with them. Absolute win. So that bridge is now being built. Next bullet point. I hope, speaking of, as far as retreats and all, have your high school students attend, at least be invited to, and really encourage them to attend your men's conferences or your men's retreats, your women's conferences, your women's retreats. Do you see that? And again, churches I've served in, we did that, and it was very sweet to see our high school gals, high school girls go to the women's retreat, go to the women's conferences, and the same thing with the young men going to the men's retreat. And then I put here, bottom line is this: your student ministry DNA is imperative. We are one church. We're not living in complete silos. We are one church. Even where I serve, even now as a volunteer student director, okay, Bedrock, here in Lynchburg, Virginia. Okay, so here's the deal. Impact is our name. Impact, Bedrock Students, is the student ministry of Bedrock Lynchburg Church. Everything that goes out, all the cards, all the handouts, we state our student ministry name, but our identity is really tapping into our local church. And our students know that. Back in the day, and even currently as a volunteer, I'm still a massive fan that your students need to know that they are part of your church. So again, bottom line, your student ministry DNA is we are one church. So ideally, they're already involved in the life of your church. They're already serving, maybe in children's ministry. They're already serving in other places in the church, as they're also part of your student ministry. I'm flying, so here we go. The preparation. This is your third on the next page. Here we are. The preparation. This is now where you're really preparing your seniors to get to that point of where they're going to launch. Okay? So I have 3 simple bullet points here. First one, I call it seniors only. My wife and I did this for years back on the West Coast. I'm a big fan of this. We would take, because that was our small group, we did it once a month. And we, let's say, religiously met once a month at our home. We didn't serve pop, we didn't serve, or soda, whichever part of the country you're from. We didn't serve lemonade, we didn't serve iced tea. We served coffee and tea. In other words, we kind of had Christian adult beverages, right? So we kind of gave them even like adult beverages. It was kind of funny. When I say that, I mean coffee and tea, okay? But we actually dealt with adult topics. For example, the very 1st of September, I'm like, okay, so how do we, what are some of your major goals? I said to them, and they're 17, 18, I go, do you realize that most of you in 5 years will be married? And they laughed at me. Well, dude, most of them within 5 years actually did most of their ceremonies. So yeah, they did get married, okay? But when they're 17, 18, they're not maybe thinking that per se, but I said, most of you will be married. I was trying to get them to think 5 years down the road, 5 years down your timeline, where are you going to be? What's up with that? So we looked at that. And then we looked in colleges. I'm a big fan of Christian colleges. I was promoting Christian colleges, West Coast, Midwest, East Coast, even serving on Seattle. And I know a lot of students will choose more of a secular or state campus, but I wanted even them to be thinking, how do you choose your vocation? Is it going to be, am I going to go in the military? Am I going to a tech school? Am I just going to learn a trade? I'm a big fan of that too. Other topics we looked at was marriage and family. We looked right into what are the biblical roles of men and women. What's this foundation of marriage based on? Here's one, budgeting. How do you budget? And this was before Dave Ramsey, okay? But now it's jump on the wagon, be a Dave fan, okay? You're teaching your senior class to think as adults with that. And then also, here's the big one, choosing a church. And we spent, if I remember right, a month or 2 on that topic. What do you look for in a local church? Let's say you've moved out of our area and you're new in a new area of the country. Where do you go find a church? What are you looking for? What are the non-negotiables? How do you find an excellent Bible teaching church? And then our last time we met, we actually walked them through how we're going to transition them out. Do you catch that? So they are learning. We still love you, but student ministry is no longer going to be including you as an adolescent, as a student. A couple more bullet points under that. Help them connect with various Christian ministries like different colleges and military, etc. And here's what I mean. Especially for those who are going off to a secular campus, I do some research and say, hey, you guys have different parachurch or, campus Christian organizations there. Or if there's military, they're going to go in the military. Where are you going to be stationed? What branch are you in? Where are you going to be stationed? Trying to find even churches for them in the area. So helping them get to that next place of connection. And then on your last bullet point there, I said here, just like you would do in a relay race, this is huge, just like you would do in a relay race, you need to make sure the next runner has the baton before you let go. Make sense? I'll say it again. Just like you would do in a relay race, you need to make sure that the next runner has the baton before you let go. And I'm not saying the student is the baton, but in a sense, yeah, they are. Because I want to make sure I'm handing them off well to the next place. And there's a big quote I have on the left side of your notes. I put this, you ready? See this like you are handing your seniors off and you're not kicking them out. So be strategic and do this well. Now let's go to the actual transition. Let's look at the actual transition. So it's now May or June, whenever your graduation season is upon you. I put in your notes, celebrate them well at the end of the school year. Make a big to-do for them. We used to love to give our last Wednesday night of that school year. That was senior night. It was so awesome. They would share spiritual highlights. They would speak. It wasn't just like a one-person show. It was like many of them were involved, and whether it was a skit, but mostly it was they're just kind of sharing like testimonies, how they've grown. And they gave, I love this, and they would give a challenge to the next rising senior class. We would have the next senior class come forward, and they would it's just profound. They would just come over them, and they would have like a gift for them representing who they were as a class to the next senior class. Very powerful moment. So celebrate them well at the end of the school year. And I put this in your notes, and I'm a big fan of this. This is how I did it. I didn't just cut them off. They graduate from high school, and in one day, we give them a Bible on Sunday in church, the typical traditional church. We have our seniors stand up. Maybe they wear their cap and gown. We give them a Bible, and in one day, they lose their student pastor. They lose their small group leader, which is their discipler usually. They lose their small group. They lose that accountability. They lose their ministry team. They in many cases lose their friends and the infrastructure they've known if we do a hard cut. So for me, I did kind of a fade out approach. We let them know at the beginning of the summer, while you're graduated, you're still welcome to come during the summer. We did not call them seniors. They already graduated. Thus we use the term graduated seniors, because seniors were the new class. We just anointed the next class moving up. So we gave our seniors that summer to fade out. They could still come on Sundays, Wednesdays. If they go to camp, they had a choice. They could work in the middle school as a camp leader, or they actually could be a camper. When it came to missions trip, they could still go on our missions trip, but they were not the key leaders. That was the next senior class. In other words, we were having them leave the gym. Think varsity basketball, okay? They're leaving the gym, and they're not hanging on as a gym rat to kind of hang out and still be living back in the day. So allow them to have that summer to fade out. I also put in your notes, but have a set date. When is that final cutoff? When they're done. So does that make some sense? So it's not a hard cut at the beginning. Kind of gave them that summer to fade out. And it worked very well. Matter of fact, the majority of our seniors every year actually went to camp, not as campers. They went as counselors for middle school, which is my last bullet point. See, because a lot of times you have high school seniors that they don't know where to go, especially if the church does not have a college ministry. So they kind of hang on to student ministry. Dude, I want to help in the youth group. Okay, I'm going to sound hardball. You had to be 21 and above to serve in high school ministry. Now, let's put our big boys, big girl pants on this one. This is going to sound rough. But I wanted to make sure there was a serious and clean break. They just weren't being in high school ministry to hang out with their friends of just a year or two younger. They were here in serving in student ministry to be truly serving and discipling or doing roles and tasks in student ministry, but they could do that in middle school ministry. In closing, I have 2 verses that I think would be dear to your hearts. As I read the scripture, just let it saturate your minds. I hope these 2 verses are the goals you have for your students. I myself am convinced, my brothers and sisters, that you yourselves are full of goodness, filled with knowledge, and competent to instruct one another. That's the maturity we want to see in our senior class. And here's another verse very close to your heart. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. You see, those seniors someday will be 30 and 35 and 40, and they'll be raising their own children. And we pray that they will be raising another generation who loves Jesus. Matter of fact, Psalm 78 is the mantra, is the theme of Next Gen Matters. For this generation to teach the next, to teach the generation yet to be born, so they will in turn teach the following generation. That's what student ministry should be about. You got your action steps, you got your let's engage. Hope we can take advantage of that in our Facebook group. Closing thought, and I'm shooting this here in August and 12th, and I would hope that you'd really take advantage of our free webinar we're offering. It's going to be in 2 weeks from tomorrow night. Okay, 2 weeks from tomorrow night, we're having that meeting at Thursday. I think it's the 27th. So I really hope you can be a part of that. Go ahead and subscribe to, or go ahead and register for that free webinar. As myself and my 3 boys, our 3 senior advisors, we're going to be looking into not just what we can't do during the COVID and relaunching our ministries, but what can we do and what must we do. I think that'll be a great blessing for you as well. And I really would encourage you to get others to join this and join our team. All right, you guys have a great and blessed week.